Hey guys, welcome to the last video to do with Witch's Sorcery, which is the new Duel Links pack that's just released as of the 17th of June. These will be covering the reprints. The first card is Justice of Prophecy. It's an Earth spellcaster at level 3 with 1600 attack and 800 defense. Its effect is, during your end phase, if you activated a spellbook spell card previously this turn, you can banish this card from the field, add both one level 5 or higher light or dark spellcaster type monster, and one spellbook spell card from your deck to your hand. You can only use the effect of Justice of Prophecy once per turn. The good thing about this card is this actually both searches one of your higher spellcaster monsters, but it's quite generic. It doesn't have to be a prophecy card. It can be, say, a Dark Magician or something equivalent to that. Even so, there are actually less limitations to it, albeit they have to be light or dark, but there's lots of support for both those attributes. It also lets you bring out search for another spellbook card, which can be quite useful. This is kind of how they like to work. Once you've activated one, you tend to be able to chain either recover cards from the graveyard or actually search for more. We have Possessed Dark Soul. This is a Dark Fiend level 3 with 1200 attack and 800 defense. The effect is you contribute this face-up card, take control of all face-up level 3 or lower monsters your opponent currently controls. I don't know how viable this strategy is, considering unless your opponent is deliberately running low-level monsters, it's not going to be that viable. Most people try and play level 4s as a summoning, unless the level 3 or lower monster has a unique effect which you can take better advantage of. Disenchanter is a light spellcaster at level 5 with 2000 attack and 2300 defense. Its effect is once per turn, you can target one face-up spell card on the field, remove one spell counter from anywhere on the field, and if you do, return that target to the hand. So this is supposed to be some kind of spell removal. It's not that useful, considering that, I mean, mostly you're just going to be going after your opponent's field spells. They don't run the strategy as much about wonder balloons, which used to be quite common, where you would discard a number of cards and your opponent would lose attack points for their monsters equivalent to 300 times the number of cards discarded. That's not that viable these days. This is the only kind of interaction I can see with this card. It's just kind of a bit of a waste for reprint. So we have Ghost Fairy Elphobia. This is a Wind Psychic level 3 with 900 attack and 500 defense. The effect is, once per turn, you can reveal one wind monster in your hand until the end of your opponent's next main phase. Monsters with a level higher than the revealed monster cannot activate their effects. So the whole point of this card is to shut down your opponent's effects. You could splash this in with the new Speedroids, of course. They have some low-level monsters in there. And of course, by doing that, you prevent your opponent from interacting. This can be useful for decks that rely on these monster effects, such as Blue Eyes, White Dragon. They have some effect monsters which you can shut down. Of course, saying that, they do have quite low-level monsters as well, who could undermine this strategy if they want to. There's nothing else I can really think of hand that is viable, but I'm sure there's something you can use. The next card is Fairy of the Spring. This is a normal spell card, which says target one equipped spell card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand, then that equipped spell card cannot be activated this turn. The whole point of this card is basically you recover an equipped spell. This can be useful in decks such as Violons or some of the Morphtronics. but it could also be useful for things such as a lot of players use the equipped spell Power of the Guardian. Being able to recover that is a good idea. The downside of it is, of course, these cards can't be activated in the same turn, which means you're going to have to go with a bit of a stalling strategy to activate during the next turn. The next card is Spiritual Forest. This is a continuous spell card which says each turn the first face-up beast, beast warrior, or plant-type monster you control that would be destroyed by battle is not destroyed. This can be quite useful within a number of decks. For example, I can think of Arrow Mages. I've seen certain people run this card. It can also be used for just generic decks as well. You do have quite a few beast monsters, and of course you've got certain beast warrior types out there as well, which can be quite viable. They're not as powerful as they could be, but you do have just quite decent general support for those. Explosive Magician is a light spellcaster synchro, level 6, with 2,500 attack and 1,800 defense. It requires one tuner plus one or more non-tuner spellcaster type monsters, and the effect is you can remove 2 spell counters from your side of the field, select and destroy one spell or trap card your opponent controls. I can see why this is reprinted, considering that there are some decks within the spellcasters that rely on spell counters, and of course spell and trap removal is actually quite good depending on the type of match you're facing. Wheel of Prophecy is a dark spellcaster level 8 with 2,700 attack and 1,700 defense. Its effect is, when this card is special summoned by the effect of a spellcaster type monster, you can target any number of your banished spellbook spell cards, shuffle them into the deck, and if you do, return your other banished spellbook spell cards to your graveyard. You can only use this effect of a Wheel of Prophecy once per turn. So this is one of those cards I was mentioning before, which can be summoned through the Justice of Prophecy. Of course, because this is a higher level 5, and of course it's a dark attribute. By doing this, you're able to actually recover a number of your spellbook spell cards back into the deck, so you can maybe search them out. And also it helps to actually bring out, even if your spellbooks go back to the graveyard, you do have some interactions. You can either recover them from the graveyard through other monster effects, or through other spellbook cards which can recover those as well. Or there's one of them that actually mimics the spellbook card of anything in the graveyard, depending on what you need. Fairy King Kingsdale is a water plant level 6 with 2,200 attack and 1,500 defense. Its effect is, while this card is in defense position, all plant type monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense. That would increase this card's force attack and defense. However, that does rely on this to remain in defense mode, this being a 2,000 defense monster at the time. You could pair it with a Chorus of Sanctuary to make it 2,500. If you're planning on running a defensive-based deck. But otherwise, I do see this being a bit of a problem card. You only have 3 monster zones out there. I'm sure there's actually better support to boost your plant-type monsters up without kind of overusing your monster zones. Pixie Knight is a light spellcaster at level 2 with 1,300 attack and 200 defense. The effect is, when this card is sent to the graveyard as a result of battle, your opponent must select one spell card from your graveyard and place that card on the top of your deck. This card is an attempt to have spell card recovery. I would say the downside is, of course, it doesn't get added to your hand, so you are reliant on drawing it. You might be needing a specific card, and which your opponent is kind of going. If they know anything about how your deck works, they're not going to give you a good spell card. They're going to see what the worst spell card is in your graveyard, and of course, it's their decision. So you could end up top decking yourself into defeat. So it's not a viable card to use. Destruction Cyclone is a wind reptile level 7 with 2000 attack and 1500 defense. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, destroy all face down and non-wind monsters. I don't really know why this card is a reprint. Of course, you do have the wind support from Speedroids, but generally I've not actually seen anyone kind of run this card, or any of the other elemental equivalents. You've got one for each of the attributes. I don't see it being that viable as a card. Spell Calling is a normal spell card, which says when this face down card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard by the effect of a spell or trap card controlled by your opponent, select one quick play spell card from your deck and set it after showing it to your opponent. My problem with this card is this is reliant on interactions by your opponent. They might not have cards they run in deck, or might have not have drawn into anything that can remove one of your spell or traps. And also it does rely on it going to the graveyard. There is the Cosmic Cyclone, which instantly banishes this card. That's a major issue. The other downside is, of course, there is you have to show the quick play spell card to your opponent before you set it. This means that your opponent knows what you're running and is not likely to do anything that will trigger that card. AntiSpell is a counter trap card, which says remove 2 spell counters on your side of the field to negate the activation of a spell card and destroy it. I can see why it's been put in here. It's generic spellcaster support, and being able to stop an opponent's spell card is useful. And the final card is the trap card, Spell Reclamation. This is discard 1 card and chain this card to a spell card you activated. Whenever that spell card is sent to the graveyard, return it to its owner's hand. That's okay depending on what you're using. If it's a particularly strong spell card, this is a decent effect. However, it does require you to discard, and of course you're using this card as well just to recover a card. So unless it's that viable, I just wouldn't run this. What do you think of the reprints that have been introduced in this pack? Is there anything you like from this? Is there anything you think is particularly good? Or were these reprints just quite bad, just as pack fillers? Leave your comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.